the city of St. Louis had always been a place where secrets sank deep, just like the murky currents of the Mississippi River. Ethan Carter knew this well as he stood on the riverbank, the weight of his crime pressing down on him heavier than the body wrapped in a tarp at his feet. His wife, Julia, had always been the bright light in his life, until that light started exposing his shadows. She had grown suspicious, asking too many questions about his late-night disappearances, the money that never seemed to add up, and the hushed phone calls he always took in another room. Ethan had tried to reassure her, but he knew she wouldn't stop until she uncovered the truth. And the truth? Ethan had been living a double life, one that Julia couldn't be a part of. That night, in the dimly lit kitchen of their small home in South St. Louis, an argument had erupted. Julia had confronted him, her voice shaking but firm. "I know what you've been doing, Ethan," she had said, gripping a piece of paper in her hands, bank statements, withdrawals he couldn't explain. He had tried to deny it at first, but when he saw the determination in her eyes, something inside him snapped. Before he knew it, his hands were around her throat, her screams choked off by his tightening grip. She struggled, clawing at him, but within minutes, she had gone still. The silence that followed was suffocating. Now, standing by the river, Ethan forced himself to move quickly. The longer he hesitated, the more likely it was that someone would see him. He had chosen this spot carefully, a secluded area near an abandoned dock, where the current was strong enough to carry away anything that entered its depths. He dragged the tarp-wrapped body to the edge, his pulse hammering in his ears. With one final breath, he pushed it into the water, watching as it was swallowed by the black waves. For a moment, he felt relief. The evidence was gone, carried away by the river. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye, a shimmer in the moonlight. Julia's necklace. It had slipped from the tarp and now lay glinting on the shore. His heart pounded as he snatched it up, his fingers shaking. If anyone found this, they would start asking questions. He had to be more careful. Ethan stuffed the necklace into his pocket and disappeared into the night, unaware that in the days to come, the river would give up its secrets, and the truth would come crashing back to haunt him. Ethan barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Julia's lifeless face, her lips parted in an unfinished plea, her eyes frozen in terror. He told himself it was over, that the river had swallowed his crime, but paranoia gnawed at him. What if someone had seen him? What if the body surfaced? By morning, he was on edge. The news played in the background while he sipped black coffee, waiting for any mention of a missing woman. Nothing yet. But it was only a matter of time. Then, a knock at the door. Ethan nearly dropped his mug. He forced himself to breathe, smoothing his face into a mask of calm before opening it. Detective Raymond Harlow stood on the porch, his brown trench coat damp from the early St. Louis drizzle. He was tall and broad-shouldered, the kind of cop who didn't need to say much to make you nervous. "Morning," Harlow said, flashing his badge. "You mind if I come in?" Ethan's pulse quickened. "What's this about?" "Just a few routine questions." The detective's expression didn't change. "Your wife, Julia, her sister reported her missing this morning. Said she hasn't been answering her phone." Ethan's stomach twisted. Of course. Emily. She and Julia were close. Too close. He stepped aside. "Yeah, come in." Harlow took his time looking around. The house still carried traces of Julia, her perfume lingered in the air, her coffee cup sat untouched in the sink. "When's the last time you saw her?" Harlow asked. Ethan forced a sigh, running a hand through his hair. "Last night. We had a fight. She took off." "Did she say where she was going?" "No. She just left." Harlow nodded, studying him. "Funny thing, though. Her car's still in the driveway." Ethan's mouth went dry. Damn it. He hadn't thought of that. She probably got a ride." Harlow hummed, unconvinced. Then he glanced down. "Mind if I ask about that scratch on your hand?" Ethan instinctively tucked his fingers under his palm. He had forgotten about the scratch, Julia's last desperate attempt to fight him off. "Just a work accident," he lied. The detective didn't blink. Ethan clenched his jaw, willing his heartbeat to slow. He needed to stay ahead of this. Harlow finally exhaled, standing up straight. "All right, Mr. Carter. If you hear from Julia, let us know." Ethan nodded stiffly. "Of course." But as Harlow turned to leave, his gaze landed on something small and gold on the edge of the coffee table. Julia's necklace. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had meant to get rid of it, but in his exhaustion, he had left it there. Harlow reached down, picking it up. He turned it over in his palm, his eyes darkening. Ethan swallowed hard. Yeah, she must have left it behind. Harlow stared at him for a long, heavy moment. Then he slipped the necklace into an evidence bag. "Funny," he said. "Her sister said she never took this off." And just like that, the river's secret had started to rise. Ethan forced a tight smile, but his palms were slick with sweat. Yeah, well, she must have forgotten it. Detective Harlow held his gaze for a beat longer before slipping the evidence bag into his pocket. Maybe. He gave a small nod. "We'll be in touch." As the door clicked shut behind him, Ethan exhaled sharply. He had been so close to slipping up. That damn necklace. He should have thrown it in the river with Julia. Now, he had to act fast. He moved to the window and watched Harlow walk to his car, rain misting over the detective's windshield as he slid into the driver's seat. Ethan knew that look on his face. Harlow wasn't convinced. Gripping the edge of the kitchen counter, Ethan ran through his options. The body. That was the real problem. If the river did its job, he had time. But if Julia surfaced, if someone found her, his alibi would crumble. He needed to know for sure. That night, long after the city had settled into sleep, Ethan drove back to the river. He parked a few blocks away from the old dock, pulling his hood over his face as he crept through the darkness. The air smelled of damp earth and rotting wood. The Mississippi moved sluggishly, its surface reflecting the dim glow of streetlights in the distance. He scanned the water, searching for any sign of Julia. Nothing. No flashing police lights. No crime scene tape. Maybe the current had carried her far downstream. Maybe he was safe. Then, a rustling sound behind him. Ethan froze. His breath hitched as he turned sharply, scanning the darkness. Nothing. Just the wind. Still, something didn't sit right. His gut twisted as he crouched by the water's edge. He grabbed a large rock and tossed it in. The splash echoed, but there was no sign of anything floating back up. Maybe he was just paranoid. Maybe. A flashlight clicked on. Funny place for a late-night stroll, don't you think? Ethan's blood ran cold. Detective Harlow stood a few feet away, his hand resting on his holstered gun. His trench coat was damp from the mist, but his eyes burned with suspicion. Ethan forced a laugh. Jesus, man. You scared the hell out of me. Harlow didn't smile. You know, when people file missing persons reports, we check all the usual places. Homes. Workplaces. He gestured toward the river. And the unusual places. Ethan swallowed hard. Look, I couldn't sleep. Thought some fresh air might help. Harlow took a slow step forward. Fresh air. Right. His eyes drifted to the water. You know what's funny, Carter? I did some checking. That spot where you're standing. There's an old security camera on a warehouse across the street. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. Harlow smiled thinly. So, imagine my surprise when I find footage of you here last night. Late. Carrying something heavy. Ethan's mouth went dry. You want to tell me what it was? Harlow asked. Ethan opened his mouth, then bolted. The chase. He didn't think. He just ran. His feet pounded against the wet pavement as he sprinted toward the street. Carter. Stop. Harlow's voice rang out, but Ethan didn't slow down. He cut through an alley, weaving between dumpsters, his breath coming in ragged gasps. If he could just make it to his car. A gunshot cracked the air. Pain exploded in his leg. He stumbled, crashing onto the asphalt. His knee scraped against the ground, but all he could feel was the burning fire in his thigh. Footsteps. Heavy boots. Then Harlow's voice, right behind him. "Game over, Carter." Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, the weight of the river's secret crashing down on him. And then, sirens. Ethan groaned, pain radiating from his leg as he clutched at the wound. The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue against the rain-slick pavement. He tried to push himself up, but Harlow's boot pressed against his back, pinning him down. "Stay down, Carter," the detective growled. His voice carried no triumph, just cold inevitability. Ethan's breaths came in sharp gasps. He had been so close. If he had just been smarter, if he had gotten rid of that damn necklace, if he had stayed away from the river. Another set of footsteps approached. More cops. "Detective, you good?" One of them, a uniformed officer, stepped into view, gun still drawn. Harlow exhaled, removing his foot from Ethan's back. "Yeah. Call it in. We got him." Ethan barely heard the radio chatter. His world was shrinking, narrowing to the throb in his leg, the taste of blood in his mouth, the weight of his own failure crushing him. Hands grabbed his arms, hauling him up. A fresh wave of pain ripped through his body, but he barely flinched. He had lost. As they cuffed him, he forced himself to look at Harlow. "You got no body," Ethan rasped, trying for a smirk, though his lips trembled. Harlow studied him, then shook his head. "That's where you're wrong." Ethan's stomach dropped. The detective pulled a phone from his pocket and tapped the screen. He turned it toward Ethan. The image made Ethan's breath catch. A blurry photo, but unmistakable. A body. Waterlogged. Tangled in weeds. Julia. "No," Ethan whispered. His knees buckled. The officers had to tighten their grip to keep him upright. "She washed up downstream early this morning," Harlow said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "A fisherman found her." Ethan's vision blurred. His mind raced, but there was nowhere left to run. The river had betrayed him. As they shoved him toward the waiting squad car, he felt the cold metal of the cuffs bite into his wrists. This was it. Game over. We have gotten to this short story. I hope you enjoy this. Kindly show your support by liking and commenting. Thanks. Subscribe and turn on the notification so you'll get new videos.